They tore down my fence while I was at work. Didn't call, didn't leave a note, didn't even pretend to ask. And for a minute there, standing in the dust where my fence used to be, I honestly thought I'd stepped into the wrong property. But nope, same oak tree by the gate, same rusted cattle trough, same stretch of pasture I'd walked 1,000 times, just no fence. And that's when I realized something real simple and real dangerous. Somebody thought they could do whatever they wanted on my land and get away with it. I live just outside a town called Dry Creek, the kind of place where people wave when they pass you, where fences aren't just boundaries, they're a handshake you can see. My name's Caleb Turner, and I've got about 80 acres that my dad left me. Not pristine, not fancy, but honest land, rolling pasture, a few stubborn oak trees, and a small herd of horses that know my voice better than most people do. Now, tucked right up against the southern edge of my land, there's this gated community called Silver Ridge Estates. You've seen the type, identical houses lined up like they came off a conveyor belt, trimmed hedges so perfect they look fake, and a clubhouse with a swimming pool that gleams like a postcard. Everything over there is controlled by their HOA. Rules about grass height, mailbox colors, even what kind of flowers you're allowed to plant. And me? I've never been part of that world, never wanted to be. The thing is, my land kind of wraps around a corner of their neighborhood, like a loose arm hugging something it doesn't quite trust. And along that boundary, I had a fence, nothing fancy, just weathered wood posts and rails, built by my dad years ago, sturdy, practical, doing exactly what it was supposed to do, keeping my horses in and everyone else out. It also happened to block the view from one of their walking trails, a trail they liked to brag about, like it was some kind of nature experience, except the nature they were looking at was my land. I'd heard whispers before, little comments when I'd run into one of their residents at the feed store or gas station. Things like, "That fence of yours is kind of an eyesore, huh?" said with a tight smile that didn't reach the eyes. I'd just shrug it off, because where I come from, you mind your business and you respect other people's property. Simple as that. But apparently, that simplicity didn't extend across the gate. That afternoon, I pulled my truck up like I always do, dust kicking up behind me, radio still humming, and right away something felt off. The line where my fence should have been looked wrong. Open. Too open. I stepped out, boots hitting the dirt, and just stood there for a second, squinting into the sun like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But they weren't. The posts were gone, ripped clean out of the ground. The rails were stacked off to the side like firewood, neat enough to show this wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was planned. My stomach dropped, not just from the damage, but from what it meant. I turned my head real quick toward the corral, and there they were, all 4 of my horses, still inside, still safe. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. If they'd gotten loose, well, that's a whole different kind of disaster. Then I saw it, stapled to one of the broken posts leaning against the dirt, a laminated notice. I walked over, already feeling my jaw tighten, and pulled it free. Big bold letters at the top. HOA violation notice. Underneath, in that cold, official tone people use when they think paper makes them powerful. Fence does not meet community aesthetic guidelines. Immediate removal required. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it didn't make sense any other way. Community guidelines? I said out loud, like maybe the empty pasture could explain it to me. I'm not even in your community. I turned the paper over. Nothing on the back, no signature I recognized, just a logo for Silver Ridge Estates and a printed name. Elaine Mercer. I'd heard that name before. HOA president. The one who ran the place like she was the mayor of her own little kingdom. I stood there a while longer, wind moving through the grass where the fence used to break it, and I could feel something building in my chest, not just anger, but something heavier, the kind of quiet realization that this wasn't a mistake. They didn't accidentally cross a line, they erased it. On purpose. I started walking the length of the damage, boots crunching over loose dirt and splintered wood, and that's when I noticed the tire tracks. Deep, wide, fresh, heavy equipment. Whoever did this didn't just show up with a hammer. They brought machinery onto my land like they owned it. I followed those tracks along the edge of the pasture, past the old oak and down toward the service road that runs behind Silver Ridge, and from there, it didn't take much to figure out where they led. There's only one contractor yard within a few miles that runs equipment like that. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who jumps straight to yelling, my dad always said. You get more truth out of a calm question than a loud accusation. So I drove over there, parked by the gate, and found the foreman out back. Big guy, sunburned neck, clipboard in hand like it was part of his arm. I walked up, held out the notice, and said, "You know anything about this?" He took one look at it, then at me, and I could see the moment he realized exactly who I was. There was a flicker of hesitation, like maybe he was deciding how much he should say. Then he shrugged, like it wasn't his problem. "Yeah," he said, casual as you please. "We got hired to remove a fence along that boundary. HOA job." I nodded slowly. "You got permission from the landowner?" He shifted his weight, glanced off to the side. "We were told it was all cleared." "By who?" He sighed, like I was making his day harder. "Elaine Mercer, president of Silver Ridge." She signed the work order. There it was. No confusion, no misunderstanding, just straight-up arrogance wrapped in paperwork. I felt that tightness in my chest again, but I kept my voice steady. "You might want to double-check your contracts next time," I said. "Because that fence was on my property." He didn't answer, just looked uncomfortable, like he suddenly wished he hadn't taken the job. And honestly, I didn't blame him. He was just doing what he was told. The real problem sat behind a gated entrance with a keypad and a list of rules. I drove back home slower than usual, dust trailing behind me like a thought I couldn't shake. Part of me kept replaying it, the nerve it took for someone to just come onto my land and decide what stayed and what went. And another part of me, quieter, colder, was starting to piece together something else. Because there was one detail I hadn't forgotten, something Silver Ridge depended on, whether they realized it or not. Something sitting right there on my land. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized they hadn't just torn down a fence. They'd just cut through the one thing that had been protecting them all along. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was pacing around angry, but because my mind wouldn't sit still. It kept circling back to one simple fact, over and over again. They crossed a line, and they didn't even know how far that line actually went. See, most folks in Silver Ridge thought their little world ran on HOA rules and monthly dues, but what they didn't realize, what most of them probably never even questioned, was where their water came from. And that right there, that was the piece nobody had bothered to think about when they decided to tear down my fence. The next morning, I was up before the sun had fully burned off the fog, coffee in hand, boots already dusty, walking down the slope toward the pump house. It's not much to look at, just a small metal structure sitting about halfway between my pasture and the boundary line. Paint chipped, hinges squeaking, the kind of place you'd overlook if you didn't know better. But inside that little building, that's where everything runs. The well's been there longer than Silver Ridge, longer than their paved roads, longer than their clubhouse, longer than every single one of those houses lined up like they belong in a brochure. My dad used to tell me about the deal, back when developers first came around, all smiles and big plans, talking about turning that land into something special. They needed water, and not just any water. They needed a reliable source, something strong enough to feed a pool, bathrooms, irrigation, the whole setup. And my dad, being the kind of man who believed in a handshake more than a contract, agreed. "We'll let you use the well," he told them, "long as we can use that road you're putting in. No paperwork, no legal easement, just trust." And for years that worked. Nobody bothered anybody. They got their water, we got easier access in a town, and life just moved along like it's supposed to. Until it didn't. I stepped inside the pump house and closed the door behind me, the metal echoing a little louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. The control panel sat there, same as always, switches, gauges, the main valve handle worn smooth from years of use. I stood there for a minute, just looking at it, thinking about my dad, about that handshake, about how something built on trust only works if both sides respect it. And then I thought about my fence, torn out of the ground like it didn't matter. "Guess that agreement ended yesterday," I muttered. I reached out, wrapped my hand around the valve, and turned it. Slow, deliberate, until it stopped. There wasn't any dramatic sound, no big moment, just a quiet shift, like a door closing somewhere far away. But I knew exactly what that meant. Out there, beyond my land, systems were about to notice. I locked up the pump house and walked back toward the house, feeling, not angry, not even satisfied, just steady. Like I'd finally balanced something that had been leaning the wrong way. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then again. And again. By noon, I got my first voicemail, polite at first, professional tone. Hi, this is Daniel from Silver Ridge Maintenance. We're experiencing some pressure issues with the water supply. Just checking to see if there's been any maintenance on your end. I didn't call back because I knew what was coming next. Day 1, their filtration system started to struggle. Without consistent flow, those systems can't keep up. Water sits. Chemicals don't circulate right. You don't notice it immediately, maybe just a slight haze, something you could blame on heat or usage. Day 2, that haze turns cloudy. You start to smell it, that mix of chlorine and something underneath, something organic. Algae doesn't take long when conditions are right. Day 3, that perfect blue pool they love showing off in brochures, turns a shade of green nobody wants to swim in. Surface gets that thin film, bugs start to show up, little signs that nature's taking back what it can. And that's when the knocking started. Late afternoon, I hear tires crunching on gravel, doors shutting, voices. I step out onto the porch, and there they are, 3 of them, dressed like they're heading into a meeting instead of onto someone else's property. One of them steps forward, mid-50s, sharp posture, that look people get when they're used to being listened to. Mr. Turner, she says. That depends. I reply, leaning against the post. Who's asking? Elaine Mercer, she says, like the name should mean something on its own. President of Silver Ridge Estates. Of course it is. She gestures back toward the others. We're here regarding the water supply. It appears to have been interrupted. Has it? I say, keeping my tone even. Yes, she replies, already sounding impatient. And we need it restored immediately. Our facilities. I hold up a hand, cutting her off. Funny thing about that. I had something interrupted too. Her expression tightens. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I step down off the porch, walk a few feet closer, and hold up the laminated notice I'd brought with me. This ring a bell. She glances at it, then back at me. And for just a second, I see it, recognition, followed quickly by dismissal. That was a necessary action, she says. Your fence was in violation of rules I never agreed to. I cut in. On land you don't own. One of the other board members shifts uncomfortably, but Elaine doesn't budge. The fence was obstructing a community view. We acted in the best interest of our residents. I let out a small breath, nodding like I'm taking that in. Well, I'm acting in the best interest of my property. Her tone sharpens. You don't have the right to disrupt essential services. I actually smile at that. Not big, just enough. Ma'am, that well sits on my land. Always has. There's no contract, no easement, no nothing that says you're entitled to it. Silence hangs there for a second, heavier than before. Then she says it, the line that told me exactly who I was dealing with. We'll have our lawyers handle this. I shrug. You do that. I reach behind me, open the door, then pause just long enough to add, oh, and while they're at it, they might want to take a look at this. I hand her a second document, not laminated, not fancy, just a clean invoice. Fence replacement, property damage, and a line that made one of the board members actually blink twice. 10 years of unpaid well usage fees. Elaine looks at it, lips pressed thin, then lets out a short laugh. This is ridiculous. Maybe, I say, but so was tearing down my fence. And with that, I step inside and close the door. Over the next few days, things started to unravel over there in a way you could almost track hour by hour. I didn't have to be inside their gates to know. Word travels in a small town, and Silver Ridge wasn't as sealed off as they liked to think. Pool reservations got canceled. Birthday parties moved or refunded. The clubhouse shut down temporarily for maintenance, which is a nice way of saying they didn't know how to fix the problem. I heard from a guy at the feed store that his sister lives in there. Said their community Facebook page turned into a war zone. People demanding answers, complaining about fees, asking why they were paying for amenities they couldn't use. And through all of that, my phone kept buzzing. Different numbers, different voices, some polite, some frustrated, some trying to act like we were all just neighbors working through a small misunderstanding. I didn't answer any of them. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cause and effect. About a week in, they started bringing in water trucks. Big ones. Expensive ones. You could hear them from my property sometimes, engines rumbling, hoses running. They'd fill that pool back up, try to stabilize it, but without proper flow and filtration, it didn't take long before things went sideways again. Meanwhile, the summer heat kept climbing, And that extra water they used for landscaping? Gone. Lawns started to dull. Flower beds lost their color. All those perfect little details they prided themselves on started slipping. And the whole time, I just went about my days. Fed the horses. Checked the fences that were still standing. Watched the sun come up and go down like it always does. But there was this quiet awareness sitting in the back of my mind, like a clock ticking towards something inevitable. Because people like Elaine Mercer, they don't like losing control. And sooner or later, they were going to realize they already had. By the second week, the silence from Elaine was louder than all the phone calls that came before it. No more polite voicemails, no more just checking in messages, just this kind of stretched out tension, like everyone over there was waiting for someone else to fix a problem they didn't quite understand anymore. And the truth is, they couldn't fix it. Not really. Not without coming back to the one place they didn't want on my front porch. I remember it was a Thursday afternoon, heat sitting heavy in the air, the kind that makes everything feel slow, even time. I was out by the barn, brushing down one of my horses, when I heard the sound again. Tires on gravel, but this time slower, more deliberate. Not a group, not a show of authority, just one vehicle. I didn't rush. Finished what I was doing, set the brush down, gave the horse a pat, then walked toward the house like I had all the time in the world. Elaine Mercer was standing by the porch when I got there. But she didn't look the same. Gone was that sharp posture, that polished confidence. She looked tired. Not messy, not undone, just worn down. Like someone who'd been explaining the same problem over and over to people who expected her to have all the answers, and she didn't anymore. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice quieter than before. "Ms. Mercer," I replied, nodding once. For a moment, neither of us said anything, just stood there with the sound of cicadas filling the space between us. Then she took a breath. "We need to resolve this." I leaned against the porch railing, arms resting easy. "I figured you might." She hesitated, not long, but enough to show this wasn't the version of the conversation she'd wanted. "The situation with the water, it's affecting a lot of people. Families. Children." I tilted my head slightly. "Funny. When my fence got torn down, that affected me. My property. My animals." Her jaw tightened just a bit, but she didn't snap back this time. "That shouldn't have been handled the way it was." That right there, that was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I let it sit for a second, then nodded. "No, it shouldn't have." She glanced toward the pasture, where the gap in the fence was still open, like a scar that hadn't healed yet. "We're prepared to rebuild it," she said. Exactly as it was. I didn't respond right away, just watched her, because this wasn't about the first offer. It was about what came after. "And," she continued, "we'll cover any related damages. Labor, materials, whatever's required." I said softly. "Go on." She swallowed just slightly. "We'd also like to formalize an agreement regarding the well. A long-term arrangement. 20 years. Now that was new. Paid up front," she added quickly, like she didn't want me to interrupt before she got it all out. There it was. The shift. 2 weeks ago, they were tearing down my fence without asking. Now they were standing on my porch offering a contract. I pushed off the railing and stepped a little closer, not aggressive, just enough to make it clear I was paying attention now. "Am I rate?" I asked. She nodded. "At your rate. And you sign it, all of you?" I said. "Board, association, whoever needs to make it stick." "Yes." I let out a slow breath, looking past her for a moment, out toward that stretch of land where my dad used to stand, hands on his hips, checking the fence line like it was part of his daily rhythm. I could almost hear him, not telling me what to do, just reminding me what mattered. Respect. Not control. Not winning. Respect. I looked back at Elaine. "I've got one condition." She didn't even hesitate this time. "Name it." "I approve the fence design," I said. "Materials, placement, everything. It goes up the way I want it, not the way your guidelines say it should look." For the first time since she got there, she paused. Not because it was unreasonable, but because it flipped the whole thing on its head. For someone who built her authority on rules and appearances, giving that up, even on one stretch of fence, wasn't easy. But she also knew she didn't have leverage anymore. "Agreed," she said finally. Just like that. No argument. No pushback. And in that moment, I knew it was over. Not in the sense that everything was fixed, but in the sense that the balance had been restored. They understood where the line was now, and more importantly, why it was there. We shook hands, which felt almost ironic, considering how all this started, and over the next couple weeks, things started moving again. Crews came back, different attitude this time. Slower, careful. They rebuilt the fence post by post, rail by rail, not rushing, not cutting corners. I stood out there a few mornings, coffee in hand, just watching, not to supervise, not to intimidate, just to be present. And you could tell they felt it. Not fear, just awareness. The new fence went up stronger than the old one. Same style, same feel, but reinforced. Like it had learned something. The contract got signed too. Lawyers involved this time. Pages of terms and conditions where there used to be a handshake. Money transferred, a number big enough to make most people blink. But to me, it wasn't about the amount. It was about what it represented. Acknowledgement. On the day everything was finalized, I walked back down to the pump house. Same metal door, same worn handle. I stepped inside, looked at that control panel again, and for a second, I just stood there, remembering how quiet it had felt the day I shut it off. Then I reached out and turned the valve back open. This time, I could almost imagine the opposite happening out there. Systems coming back to life. Water moving. Pressure building. Clarity returning. Not just to their pool, but to the understanding between us. A few days later, I heard laughter drifting over from their side again. Kids, probably, back in the water. The kind of sound that carries farther than you expect when the wind's right. And I'll be honest, I didn't hate it. Because this was never about ruining anything. It was about reminding someone, you don't get to build something nice by stepping over the people around you. Now, here's the part that still gets people talking whenever this story comes up. Some folks say I went too far. That I should have just filed a lawsuit, handled it the right way. Let the courts deal with it instead of shutting off their water like that. Others, they think I didn't go far enough. That I should have kept it off longer, made them sweat more, maybe even pushed for more money. And me? I think about that moment, standing there in the dust where my fence used to be, realizing someone had made a decision about my land without ever looking me in the eye. And I think about how easy it is for people in positions like that to forget there are real consequences on the other side of their choices. So yeah, maybe what I did wasn't polite, but it was clear. And sometimes, clear is what people need. Now I'm curious what you think. If you were in my place, would you have done the same thing, shut it down, force their hand? Or would you have taken a different route, lawyers, courts, something slower, maybe cleaner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because out here, lines matter, and how you handle someone crossing them says a lot more than the line itself. And if you've ever had a neighbor or an HOA push a little too far, go ahead and share that story too. I've got a feeling I'm not the only one who's had to remind somebody where the boundary really is.